Hey there! I love sharing my Diagon Alley book nook build with you, and I'm excited to show you how I created the things for it. If you haven't seen the whole build, check it out here. Also, please forgive me if I sound a little bit slurred. I just got my wisdom teeth out. So let's get started with building a firebolt. Okay, let's start with making the armature. I drilled the firebolt to get the size I wanted, then used 24 gauge bronze wire as the core. I doubled the wire and twisted it together to make sure the clay had something to grab onto. If you needed to do a much thinner armature, you could use thinner wire, crumpled tinfoil, or even toothpicks if you can get the shape you need. So let's get it into the firebolt shape. When you're buying wire, look for something that's easy to bend with your hands, but takes a little bit of strength to move. If it's too soft, you can bend the armature while you're putting the clay on it later, or bend it unintentionally while you're still working with it. Next up, let's add the clay. I like to use Sculpey Firm. I'll link all the materials in the description below. When you're adding the clay, make sure to squish it into the twists so it doesn't start sliding off while you're working. This step was just a lot of smoothing and making sure we got the right shape for the handle. Let's get to texturing. I'm using a needle tool and some clay sculpting tools that I absolutely love to get a clear line between the bark and the core wood. If you take a look at the firebolt from the movies, it has that natural bark look on the bottom with the polished wood at the top, and I love that. I'm using a clay sculpting tool with a silicone tip here to get that clean line. Since the bark is rougher than the core wood, let's give it some more texture. I like adding knots and stippling some of the edges to make it look a little bit rougher. When it was done, I baked it in the toaster oven. And here it is fresh out of the toaster oven. Now for the bristles. I made the general shape out of a lump of Sculpey Firm. This looks a lot different than the one in the movies, but if you're looking for something that's super aerodynamic and absolutely perfect, why would it be super bushy? So I made mine very aerodynamic. You can fill this out with tinfoil to cut down on baking time and weight, but this broom is so small that I could get away with carving a solid block. I carved some deep lines with my needle tool and added a lot more texture with a brass brush. Let's carve in some areas where the bristles are attached and where the footstand will go. Time to bake it again. I bake often so I don't ruin details as I work on other sections. There's a little bit here that's not quite smooth, so I'm using 1000 grit sanding paper to get rid of the texture that I don't want. And it's painting time! I'm going with warmer tones for the interior portion. The firebolt is supposed to be made of ash, so I went with a warmer wood and a darker bark, but took a few liberties with the bark texture just because I wanted those knots. I'm doing a lot of layers of color on the bristles to make sure it doesn't look too flat at the end. After we've got the base layers of color on and everything is pretty dry, let's add in highlights and shadows. I'm using my favorite burnt umber mixed with black for the shadows. I'm not doing it as watery as a typical wash would be, just because I don't want to get it on that interior wood, and I'm careful to wipe off the extra as I go along. Now for the highlights. I'm mixing white with the burnt umber I was already using so it doesn't stand out too much. The highlight is really more of a light gray. If you make it pure white, it can come off as a little bit more like cel shaded, and that's not really the look I wanted to go for this. Let's add some bronze to the bristles so it looks like the bindings. And let's see how small I can write the word Firebolt. I'll probably come back and retouch this later, to be honest. For the final touch, let's add the footrests. I'm using the same wire as I did before for the armature. I curved it around a marker and flattened the footrests with a hammer. Again, super glue is one of my favorite things. And that's how I made the Firebolt. Thanks so much for watching. Please leave me a comment if you decide to make one too. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to see more. I'll see you in the next one!